And we are very privileged to have Dan Gillaspia all the way from Houston, Texas, a very wet Houston at the moment. Welcome, and thank you so much for giving up. Well, what are you going to be doing at the moment? Because you're probably flooded and you can't go anywhere.
Yeah, I'm stranded here. We've been stranded here since Friday. So I've just been kind of, the furthest we've roamed out is within the apartment complex, because we were for a little while essentially an island. And I'm just waiting for to kind of get back to work, I guess, because our servers at our offices downtown, I'm pretty sure we lost power. I don't know that we've got it back. So still waiting for those to come back online so I can start doing a little bit of work. In the meantime, it's just kind of passing time, watching the story unfold on the news.
Or you're lucky you've got power and you can watch the news, because there are quite a few people are talking about power outages and complete flooding of the buildings, and they've had to evacuate.
Yeah, we've lost power in and out a little bit, but for the most part, I mean, we've been very, very lucky to maintain power. And so I'm very grateful for that. There are tons of people who the water shut down, power shut down. And so, you know, they're living in our shelters around the city. So we're very, very fortunate to still have power right now.
That is awesome. Well, just so that we can get a bit of background to this, you are working in the legal profession, is that correct?
Yes, I'm an attorney, and I work here in Houston, downtown.
So anything that you say can and will be, no, I'm just kidding. So you obviously are mindful of all the legal issues, and you read the small print because that's your speciality.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one thing that I think made it kind of easy to get into this, was that's what I do pretty much as a profession, is to go over, you know, all of these legalities and fine print. And so a lot of people, they look at fine print on something and they just, you know, they just think what a burden it is to go through that. And it is sometimes, but it also, I mean, it makes it a lot easier when you know everything that what you're signing up for entails. So that kind of made it a lot easier, I think, for me to get into it and know somewhat what I'm doing.
Okay, so now we were chatting a little bit earlier, and from what I could understand, in your youth, you were not a major traveler at all. Can you tell us a little bit about your traveling history in your youth?
Yeah, I mean, we took some trips here and there, and like I was saying, you know, my parents were amazing. Like I could not have asked for better parents, but it just really wasn't economical for us. I mean, we have a family of, in total, I'm the youngest of 5, so you know, there are a lot of us. Yeah, and you know, we took kind of down the road, you know, here and there. We did take a trip to Disney World, which was awesome, but I never really went abroad until I was about 20 in college, and so that was the first time. It was in Oaxaca, Mexico, which is very, very much not, you know, Cancun, Mexico. It's not one of these like touristy areas where you're just on a Caribbean island or something. It's very much like a different culture, and so for me, I just loved it. I loved how I had to wrestle with the language barrier and how I just got to deal with people and just standing out. I mean, I was like a foot taller than everybody there. So it just, I stuck out like a sore thumb, but I love that because every day you just woke up and it was something new. And after that, I knew, I was like, okay, I got to find ways to travel. So I think the travel bug kind of hit me around the age of 20 or so.
And where was your first major international flight to?
First major international flight was to Australia. I got it was sort of a mixture of a study abroad and an internship doing refugee law down there in Sydney, Australia. And so that was a trip. I flew economy. This was back before I knew about everything.
So those old days when we used to fly economy.
I remember that. It was a very, very just long flight. I'm one of those people who cannot sleep on planes. It's very, very rare. I mean, bed, which fortunately can happen in first class, but
apparently so. I mean, I've only never heard about it, but
it was a painful ride. But you know, Sydney was great because kind of like South Africa, there's not really that language barrier. You know, people speak English everywhere, so a little easier or more convenient to do things. But that was also when it kicked up and it was like, oh, okay, you know, this was flying pretty far away from the U.S., but this is doable, and so it kind of got me more comfortable with going further away, and just made me want to do it more.
So before we get into what it is that you do, the term travel hacking kind of has negative connotations, because it's got the word hacking in it, but that's not what it's about at all, is it?
Right. So I'm not a fan of the word travel hacking, but I go with it, because I know it's somewhat recognizable and catchy, and the media uses it, so it's whatever. But the travel hacking that I would just call myself a credit card enthusiast. I mean, that's what it would come down to. So
I think my wife is one of those too.
yeah.
But we're not flying first class.
But the different versions of it, some people, travel hacking to them is finding hostels to stay in for like $5 US a night or something, traveling dirt cheap, which there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously you can see so much of the world. You can just move out and travel for 6 months if you really know how to get by like that. But for me, I never really did much of that. So that's not the travel hacking that I talk about. Mine is more utilizing mostly credit card rewards to travel for free or as close to free as possible. So you're covering all your travel expenses, from hotels to airfare, even things like taxis or other, excursions and things like that can be covered. So travel for free or as close to free as possible.
So when did the idea come to mind that I've flown to Australia, I've flown capital class, I think it's time for my own private lounge and a shower? I mean, when did the switch over in mindset happen? And there must have been a catalyst or an aha moment where it all happened.
Yeah, well, there was, and the funny thing is I kind of knew, I had this really vague notion and idea of what this was. Like, I knew people did stuff like that, but I just thought it was so out there that it just wasn't for me, or I just didn't know how to do it. But the aha moment you're talking about was, we were actually, Brad and I were living in the UK, and we decided to fly back. My dad flew us back to surprise my mom at some point. Mm-hmm. And some premium economy tickets, right? So, it's not quite economy. You got a little bit more leg room and a little bit more width to your seat. And we were really excited about these seats because it wasn't economy.
What's the difference between premium economy and regular economy? Do they move the curtains higher up? And do they give you three things, chicken, beef, or another beef? How does it work?
Just a slightly less miserable experience than economy. I mean, you've got, I think we had 2 people in our section, so it was just us 2, a little bit more leg room, and they're maybe a little bit nicer to you. But when we went to go board the plane, they scanned our ticket, and then there was like a little, sound that went off, and they're like, "Oh, we have a different ticket for you," and they gave it to us. And then I looked at it, and it said Club World, which is business class on British Airways. And I was like, I didn't really know. It just was a random upgrade. Both Brad and I got the upgrade right as we were entering the plane, pretty much. And so they had to help us to our seat, because I was like, I don't even know where to go. And then I saw our seat, and it had the fully lie flat bed and all the controls and the pillows and the blankets. And there's a flight attendant walking around with champagne. And then Brad kind of looked at them like, "Is this for us? Like, can we take this?" And they're like, "This is your seat," And then I was like, wow, like, and so this transatlantic flight, which from London to Houston, I guess, was like 10 hours or so, give or take. And all of a sudden, we're having champagne served to us, all these meals, and we're taking naps on a fully lie flat seat and watching in-flight. It was unlike any other flight experience I had ever had, which is very funny now, because British Airways business class is probably at the bottom of what I would consider premium. But at the time, it might as well have been at the top.
Such a snob. I love it. This is brilliant.
And it was like, but at the time it was so magnificent, and I was just like, oh man. And flight, and on the way back to the UK, we got upgraded again, and so it just ruined us. It was just,
How did you pull that off? I mean, was it just because you flew business class there that maybe they automatically attached you business class return?
I think it was just dumb luck. And so after that, that's what I was like, I got to find a way to travel like this, because I just don't want to go back to economy. And that's a real thing. We'll talk about that. It ruins you in a lot of ways from traveling, because, nowadays, especially with Norwegian Air, WOW Air, you can find these super cheap transatlantic flights for like $100 if you find the right time. But after you've been flying business class, you just look at that and you're like, that's cheap, but I don't know if that's worth it.
It's incredible how your mindset has changed, that you've had this experience purely by accident or by chance, and now all of a sudden you actually look at something that you would have, a few years ago, if you knew that you could fly to London for $100 on Norwegian Airlines, you'd say, hell yes, this is brilliant. Now you're thinking, $100, I'll spend $500 if I can go first class. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. And sometimes I do think back and I'm like, man, if I hadn't become such a travel snob with business class and first class, like we could have used these miles and gone around the world 10 times, but at the same time, there's a lot to be said, and it's not for everybody. Not everybody values having business class and first class. Some people think that we're idiots and we're wasting our miles, and that's fair. But I love it. So it's just I just like doing it.
They can say what they like, and they can call you an idiot, but you're the one who's flying first class, drinking the champagne. So now, do you purposely book trips that take longer so that you can spend more time in those cabins, or do you still look for the shortest journey between two destinations?
Now it's got to the point where we just like to experience new cabins. So we have actually purposely booked connecting flights so that we can maybe experience the cabin on this type of aircraft, and then maybe there's an A380 we want to fly here, and then a 777. So we'll look and see, okay, we can try out these different products. So yeah, it's not like we're not always looking for like the straightest, most direct flight at this point. It's more about just the experience. If there's a new product we can try, we'll go out of our way and fly longer because you're comfortable, and so it's not really a big deal.
Could it be safe to say that you're a little obsessed with this sort of thing, that perhaps you probably have subscribed to every single newsletter and Facebook page and Twitter account that involves travel?
Yeah, definitely there's an obsession. I spend so much time reading about this stuff and writing about it upon arriving my blog. So it's definitely an obsession. I think it's a healthy obsession for the most part, but it also, it's interesting that when you get into something like this, it's sort of like becoming a fan of another sports team or something, because you go through these ups and downs, and so you're kind of adding a whole new stress and joy to your life, because these things change so much. There are devaluations, credit cards go away, or like the entire landscape just kind of becomes uprooted just overnight sometimes. So it's something that, yeah, it's been an obsession, but it's also, it's had its highs and its lows.
Well, I would suspect that you'd need to be a bit of a problem solver. You'd have to be able to think creatively and outside the box, because at the end of the day, you're going to have a deal, and then you're going to make a purchase of that ticket, and then they are not going to honor those miles anymore because the policy's changed, and then you have to then think creatively and do something else. So, that really is a great intellectual exercise per se, to actually, see an entire trip from start to finish, and make sure that it's successful.
Yeah, definitely. There's a whole problem-solving element to it that I think a lot of people, including myself, is what sort of we love about doing this, because it forces you to problem solve and to find solutions to problems and issues that you didn't see coming. And just sort of like if you're working through a strenuous math problem or something, like it feels good when you get it right in the end and you finish it, you work through it. And so there's a lot of kind of like mental gymnastics that happens, especially with the type of trips that we do. We like to do these kind of complex around the world itineraries. And when you are trying to fly exclusively business or first, availability that becomes hard to find. You have to find availability that links up with all of the other segments and links up in the destinations that you're trying to go at. And so it's a constant changing. You have points that you're trying to bring over from one program to another, but you don't want to waste them. And, you know, timing is an issue. So it's a lot. And you just sort of wrestle with it for weeks and weeks or months, depending on how long it takes. And in the whole process, you know, like we said, you're getting devaluations happening. And so you have to kind of almost start over in some ways, and just rules you didn't expect. All of a sudden now you can't get this credit card because you're ineligible for, you know, this new rule that came to place. And so it's really kind of stressful in a lot of ways, but the reward in the end is worth it.
Okay, but now before we get into the technical stuff about how it all works, tell us about your recent round the world trip. Where did you go? Which stops did you make? And tell us, give us some insight into, was it business class or first class? What's the difference between the two? And which airlines you fancied? So we can get a bit of a sense of that amazing, the one that they've been featuring all over social media in the last, I don't know, it's been exploding all over social media.
Yeah, so we in Houston and flew to LAX to kind of get out. And we actually did that on Southwest Airlines, which is like a kind of a low-cost carrier almost in the States, if you're familiar with them. But then we flew out on our first major segment from LA to Tokyo, Japan, and we flew on Singapore business class, which is one of the best business class cabins available. It's actually one of my favorite. And that's just because you have these ultra wide, they're almost like recliners. They're just so wide, the seats. It's almost ridiculous how much room they give you. And the service is phenomenal. Singapore Airlines, I think, has the best service out of any airline. So attentive and professional and just nice. And the food was good. And so we flew into Tokyo and we stayed there for a few days, kind of explored the city some. And then we flew out from Tokyo to Singapore, and that was on Singapore Suites. So that's their amazing first-class product. It's actually been around for almost 10 years, and they're going to be revealing a new first-class probably like any day now. So within the coming weeks, with the new first-class cabin, and it's supposed to be one of the best. You know, they're already like one of the best. So I can only imagine what they're going to do. But that was an airline, a first-class cabin where you can actually have a full-size double bed in the interior cabins. There's a partition that lowers, and they lower down the beds. It's a full-size double bed. So that was just great, getting good sleep. I mean, that was the first time I've ever really slept like a rock on a plane before.
I could never sleep on a plane like that. I would be so excited that I'm actually in a room with a double bed and I've got TV and champagne being served. I mean, I'd be so excited. I'd be walking around going, excuse me, I'm actually in first class. I'm just carrying my champagne around. I mean, I would be, maybe the novelty obviously wore off after the first or second flight for you.
Well, maybe part of it was I had too much champagne, and that may have put me under what I wanted. But it was, I remember that flight being I was a little bit warm in that flight, a little bit heated, I think. So I did fall asleep for a little while, but you know, the whole thing was like a whirlwind. Our time zones were all just screwed up, and we were barely sleeping because when we were at a destination, we were going from morning to sunset. I mean, just running around doing things. So the plane rides in a lot of ways were kind of moments to give us some real relaxation and some rest. And but from Singapore, we went over to Cape Town via Johannesburg. And we flew on Singapore business again. But it was, again, this is what I was talking about earlier. This was a different type of aircraft. This was an A350 and the other one was an A380. So it was a different type of business class experience. It was even better than the other one.
Wow.
And so, yeah, the seats were more modern. They just kind of felt a little bit more sleek. And so and that's the other thing too. Sometimes, you know, it's the same airline, the same cabin, but it's a different feel to what you have. And so we slept really good on the way in, and then Cape Town, we just roamed around for, I think it was like 5 or 6 days, and we did things like the shark diving, and is it called Ganspai?
Ganspai, yeah. I mean, how was that? Did you see any sharks?
Yeah, we saw a handful of them, and we actually had one that came like right on our camera, and like the camera is like looking into its jaws, just like opening up. It was crazy, and it like even hit my camera, and it was crazy. I mean, it was up close and personal, but that's what I wanted. I was looking for that for years. I was telling you earlier that I had this internship, and that was one of the things I was like, oh, I'm going to do that on some weekend or something. So. That was really cool, and we did a helicopter ride over the city, and that was just beautiful to see. Because I didn't even really grasp the full extent of the beauty of Cape Town and the neighboring, the 12 Sisters or something. I don't know what it's called,
Apostles,
but yeah, and so like it was just amazing to see that from the sky and to get photographs, because that's one of my biggest passions is photography. So to be able to live that out was just amazing. And also we finished it up with a cultural tour of Cape Town. And so apartheid, learning about the history of Cape Town, and our guide, he was half black, half white. He grew up during apartheid. So he had all of these stories to tell us. And that just really left, like, I think the biggest lasting impression on me, because it was just kind of a reawakening of humanity in a lot of ways. And because all of that stuff is so recent still, so it was just, there was so much going on this trip. We were gaining just these awesome experiences of flying around and this kind of adventurous stuff, but also it was still very much a cultural kind of connection type trip. So we tried to kind of work everything in that we can. And I think that's why Cape Town just kind of left its impression on me, and why it was one of my favorite spots.
So definitely you're coming back, which we hope.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's no way. I mean, there's still so much we didn't even see, and so it'll be a spot.
Did you go see any wild animals?
We didn't do a safari.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
National Park. Yeah.
We'll sort you out on that one. Okay. And then from Cape Town, where did you go?
And then from Cape Town, we flew back up via Johannesburg to Abu Dhabi via Etihad Airways. And this was interesting because Etihad has a phenomenal business class product, but it was on a different aircraft. So on this aircraft, we were still a little bit new to some of these cabins, and we chose these seats where we're right next to each other in the middle. So it's business class, you're able to recline, but they were cramped. And so we were kind of like elbow to elbow, almost like we would be in economy. And so it was almost like it wasn't really worth it. I mean, in a way, yeah, I would take that over economy, of course, but I would have maybe looked for other routes if I had known, that one. So that kind of was a slight letdown. I mean, we still were able to sleep some and that, but it was the next leg that was the one that kind of blew them all out of the water. And that was it's called the Etihad First Class Apartment. And this is one of the newer first class cabins. And it's called an apartment for a reason, because it feels like one. You have your seat, it's a big kind of like a throne of a seat. And then you have this footrest that comes out to a bed. And again, you have a partition that can lower, and you can connect the cabins. So you kind of share, it's not a full bed because there's still a lower partition there, but you're still sharing it with someone else. So Brad and I shared that space, and it just opened it up even more. So you have this 3-panel vanity mirror that opens up, and all of these amenities for you in it. You have a little mini bar. There's so much in there. And again, it's the space that really is what distinguishes products from others. You can have a comfy seat, and that's nice, but just having all that space, and then the privacy too. You have a door that shuts, so it's your own little layer to just relax in and watch movies, and this big screen TV with hundreds of movies and shows. So that was probably, really hard for me to sleep in that cabin, because like you were saying earlier, the excitement of it all, it was hard, because I was just like, man, I was looking at the map, we're getting closer and closer to New York, and I didn't want it to end, because it was really just it almost kind of put me in a state of zen, to be honest. It was so different from anything I ever had experienced.
Wow. But now you do realize that there's added complexity. So you not only have to find the flights that have business or first class, but you have to pick the planes as well. So now it adds a new level of complexity, because there's business class and there's business class, because it depends on which airline and which plane they're going to be using.
Right, exactly. And that was one of the first things that I remember being confused about, because I was so happy I'd found this route, and I was talking to people. I think it was on some like chat or forum or something, and then I was like, oh, you know, the apartment, and they were like, that doesn't fly the apartment, and I was like, no, you don't understand. This is, you know, Etihad first class, and they're like, no, that's a different type of first class. That doesn't have the apartment. And then I started to learn. I was like, oh, and I learned that that's something you'll find in other airlines too. I mean, Singapore, you'll find it sometimes. You know, it's the same exact route, and you just think, okay, they fly this apartment on this route, but in fact, they fly 3 or 4 different planes, and so you have to know which one.
So, do you have a list of the exact planes, or do you first pick your destination and then start searching out the routes and the planes they're going to be using?
I think we're still sort of in this phase of wanting to explore the different cabins, and so it's kind of a mix. I mean, we're not going to just travel to like just to experience a cabin. You know, we're not going to travel to a place that we've been to like 2 or 3 times already, probably, but we may connect there. You know, we might fly through there. We're still focused on the experience of it. We still have a lot of different cabins to try out, and so we'll definitely look at, okay, what cabin flies where, and then, oh, do we like that destination? Yeah, it's cool, so we'll go with that one.
Whew. Okay, so now you've traveled to, is it Abu Dhabi?
Abu Dhabi, and we stayed in Dubai, but we traveled through their airport.
Okay, and then where did you go from there?
That's whenever we flew to New York, and so New York was kind of, we were pretty worn out at that point. I mean, even though we know you're sleeping on planes and relaxed, it was just, around the world trips really are exhausting. I mean, there's so much fun, and I think that's my favorite way to travel. But by that, like, that 3rd week or 2nd week goes by, you're just kind of gassed a little bit, especially like us. We like to just do things all day and have very little downtime. So I think we went to a Broadway show. We just walked around, and then we were kind of ready to get back.
I mean, also jet lag. I mean, if you're traveling from one side to the other, is it from east to west or west to east? You feel it more in particular places?
Yeah, they say that, you know, I just feel like I just feel it regardless. I mean, it doesn't matter which way I'm going.
You felt it all over.
Yeah,
so they don't stop you from feeling it in business class. You still feel it anyway.
I mean, if you get sleep, yeah, I think you can. It helps. I'll say that it definitely helps. It doesn't hurt you like, you know, economy would. So that helps. But you know, I'm one of those people. Once my, you know, circadian rhythm, once that gets off, I mean, there's not much that can put me to sleep. So.
Okay, but now the big question is, you get back home, and everyone is very excited about the fact that you've traveled all over the world. Which hotels did you stay in? Because you didn't stay in poopy little hotels. You stayed in 5-star hotels.
Yeah, we stayed in some nice hotels, and we used the same kind of system with the credit cards to do that. And we stayed in some really nice hotels, like the Intercontinental in Tokyo was really nice. The Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, which you've probably seen. It's the hotel with like
the pool. I've seen that. Yep.
Kind of, yeah. That was a really, really cool hotel. That was kind of one of those bucket list destinations. And you know, in Cape Town, there's not a lot of hotels or hotels where we could use our points. There just really wasn't a lot. But we were able to stay at the Westin, which was a fabulous hotel. I really, really enjoyed it there. Kind of more of a business feel to it, but just a great hotel. And then Abu Dhabi, Dubai, we stayed in the W there, it's a newer hotel and very futuristic, kind of like a Star Trek feel in the rooms. That's probably the coolest hotel I've ever just stayed in, just from the visuals of it. I mean, it just looks so cool. And in New York, we stayed in the Ritz-Carlton, which is, you know, one of the upper hotels, but
that's all still old school.
You know, I kind of. Yeah. I wasn't very overly impressed with the Ritz-Carlton. They have 2 in New York now. So one is in Battery Park, and there's one that's even like a higher tier. I think it's near Central Park. But the one in Battery Park, it was okay. But, you know, again, the tail end of that trip, we were just kind of ready to just get back.
Okay, but now we want to know how you did it. Because That's what this is all about. I mean, how is it that guys who are used to traveling cattle class end up flying first and business class, staying in 5-star hotels, and what should have cost you over $50,000 only cost you $400, and those dollars were not even spent on your travel; they were spent on excursions and outings at the cities that you went to?
Well, the starting point for us was the credit cards. So here in the U.S., it's really, if you have a good credit background, a good credit score, and I'm not sure how that works in other places like South Africa, but in the U.S., if you have a good credit score, you can do a lot of things that just make your life easier. I mean, you can get better loans, better interest rates. You know, you can get approved to live in places. So it's important just to have a great credit score, just to have a better life, to not be burdened by it. But one of the big perks is credit cards. You can sign up and get approved for them. And so I got into just reading blogs, reading websites, and just doing research and finding out that, oh, there are all these different credit cards and they earn points. And I found out that there are different types of credit cards and different bonuses, sometimes even for the same card. So this was a big thing for me that I found out from the get-go, was sometimes you may have the same card, but it might offer 2 separate sign-up bonuses. One maybe for 30,000 miles, one for 60,000 miles. But you just have to know where to find that offer for that higher mileage offer, because it's not advertised publicly. It's maybe kind of buried somewhere. And so I started realizing, like, oh, I can double up my earnings just by finding the right cards to apply for. And another thing was, there's a lot of restrictions and rules. You have to know how to apply for these cards, because there's some rules, like you won't get approved for a card if you've opened 5 or more in the last 2 years, or if you've opened certain types of cards in the last 90 days. You know, all these different issuers like JP Morgan, Citibank, American Express, they have different rules. And so I kind of got into that and learned, okay, so there's a system here and I have to learn how to navigate this system and how to do this. And I put a plan into place, like, okay, let's earn this card now and then this card later, you know, a couple of months here. And so we just started stockpiling all these miles. And that's how it sort of took off in the beginning.
And how many credit cards do you have?
We have over 50 now between the two of us. We might get ready to trim a couple here pretty soon, but you know, most of those have no annual fee, so we're not paying annual fees on them, and they're just sort of sitting there. And you know, they don't. Some of them get used a lot, so we have our kind of our primary cards we use on mostly everything. Maybe just alive.
So if I understand it correctly, if you sign up with a brand new credit card at a specific bank, they will, as an incentive, give you, let's say, 30 or 40,000 air miles. And if you, for example, spend a certain amount of money per month and then pay it back, you'll get a bonus. Or there's an incentive that every month, if you have a $3,000 or $1,000 credit and then you pay it back, they will continuously give you bonus miles. Is that how it works?
Well, it can vary, but for the most part, the standard way it works is you sign up for a card and they have a sign-up bonus offer. And a standard offer is spend $3,000 within 3 months and you'll get X amount of points. So it can be 30,000, 50,000, sometimes 100,000 if you get really lucky. And so,
and how many points do you need for a flight, for example, from the US to a European destination on a first-class ticket?
I mean, you'd need somewhere upwards of 100,000 points, kind of on average. Again, it kind of depends on the program and the airline that you go through, but you're looking at about 100,000 if you wanted to get class. You could probably get a little lower than that, but it just sort of depends. And it also depends, are you doing, you know, one way or round trip? Because a lot of times if you book a round trip, you save on the miles versus just the one ways. So, but yeah, so I mean, 100,000 would definitely get you, or actually probably lower, probably around 80,000 or so. If you're talking about Europe, you could get first class over there.
So let me do a quick calculation. 50 credit cards on average, 80,000 mile. I mean, you're traveling the world first class on a daily basis.
Well, it's crazy because we have more miles than our time actually permits us to travel. I mean, we're both in the legal field, so we're both very busy, and it's not always easy to just take off. So we have to kind of stagger these trips out, spread them out over like a year time, to where maybe once a year we go on a big trip, and then in between there we kind of have these 2-night or 3-night trips kind of sprinkled in.
And you can just take time off work and do that?
For me, it's a little bit easier. Brad kind of has a little bit more kind of restrictions he has to kind of work around, which, you just find ways to do it, whether it's working, overtime, or building up what's called comp time, which sort of, it just allows you to accumulate more time to take off. And I mean, you just got to make, sacrifices sometimes. And like, we traveled over Christmas last time, and, a lot of times you want to stay with your family over Christmas, and but sometimes you just have to take advantage of a trip that is available during that time.
Of course. And if you've got enough air miles, you could take the family with you.
Yeah, and actually I'm in the process of organizing a trip for our family, a big trip in I think another year or so, possibly to Hawaii or some other, kind of like exotic place where points are going to play a large role in that. And I think it's really exciting, helping out family and friends too, because you all of a sudden you develop this expertise in something that you can share and give real value to people. And so that's been very, very just exciting to be able to do that. And also to help, because, like I was saying, the credit score is so important. So you're helping them, kind of advance toward their travels, but then all of a sudden you're helping them actually shape something like their credit score and build that up. And that has ramifications far beyond just, travel hacking. So that's also a very important part to it too.
So I mean, basically, what you're really saying is that they're going to have to work hard at earning their points, and you'll help and guide them to make sure that you all get on the plane and sit in the first class together. The one brother that was quite annoying, he can go sit in cattle class if he doesn't pull his weight. So, I mean, it is quite a team effort to bring it all together.
Right, and like you were saying, it's sort of like the old phrase, teach someone how to fish versus just, want. And I think that's really important. And it's been, I think, like I said, a twofold benefit for people. It's the travel, which is, the exciting, kind of like the flashy part of it, but there's also the real part of building your credit score. So when you go to get a new car or a new house, you're in a better position. You can get a better loan. You can save sometimes tens of thousands of dollars in the long run, simply because you opened up a couple of credit cards a year ago and you built up your score, and now you're going to get a better interest rate. And so there are real life benefits to this that I think are really important.
But now wait a second, your interest rates in the US are like 1% or something like that. So I mean, if you're going to get credit rating, I mean, basically you're borrowing money and you're paying back the same amount. It's really not a big deal.
I mean, I've seen people that, because they've had good credit scores, they've been able to get 0% interest rates. So, but if you messed up and you fell back on some bills, maybe even a year or two ago, you can still be feeling that hurt and get denied on things. And so it's really important to have a good score here in the US.
Okay, so I know that there are going to be a couple of questions out there, because we've got a lot of teachers who have also signed in. And as you know, teachers are the most affluent members of the population. We have millions of dollars to spare to fly first. We normally fly first class anyway. And I'm sure that many of them would be interested to know, how it is that you've managed to pull it off. Are there any tips and tricks that are beyond the credit card incentives of pulling in air miles? Are there any other ways of earning hotels or excursions, things like that would be useful for us to know?
Well, there are other ways to earn miles. I mean, obviously, earning miles by flying. Let's say if you even do a decent amount of just domestic flying around the country or somewhere, if you're flying on a certain alliance partner, you can start looking at, okay, where am I going to credit these miles? And there's actually a website I think it's called Where to Credit, and it'll tell you the best airline to credit your miles to, so that you can accumulate the fastest amount of miles and points. There are, in a lot of countries, I'm not sure if South Africa has this. I would be surprised if they didn't, though, is utilizing shopping portals. So anytime you go to buy something online, there are shopping portals that you can go through, and a lot of these will give you cash back. If you don't necessarily want miles, you can just earn, maybe 5% cash back, but the airlines will offer you miles for every dollar you spend. And so you're going to buy the stuff anyway, right? If you're, they do specials on things like school supplies, or when the holidays come around, that's a popular time to do it. And you can earn miles just by purchasing the items that you would have purchased anyway. And that's a way to kind of get some. And then I think, beyond that, it's just your miles. A lot of people think that a lot of people in this community get really excited about earning the miles and getting the credit cards, because that's exciting. It's kind of an adrenaline rush, but they kind of don't pay attention to how to use them properly. And that's kind of I would say maybe like 60–70% of it is knowing how to efficiently maximize the value out of your miles and not to waste them. And so even if you may not have the most miles, or you can't get all of these credit cards, you can still learn how to maximize your miles by learning about these programs.
Sure. I'm still quite excited about the whole fact that people can actually travel and first class and do it for free because they open up a credit card. I mean, if you think about it, the maths tells you that a trip, for example, from South Africa to the US and back on regular economy will cost about 15,000 Rand. So if I open up a credit card and they're going to offer me a business class trip from South Africa to the US and back, that's going to be valued at about 80–90,000 Rand. For me to go and run that kind of credit, that's never going to happen. So they are definitely going to lose. And if they're trying to keep me for the next 20 years because they're hoping to make that money somehow on the transactions, I mean, it would take quite a few years to run up that kind of money.
Right. And so, again, this kind of goes back to what I was saying about people who utilize. In fact, I wrote an article and I forgot the exact percentages, but the percentage of people who get travel credit cards and who use them on international redemptions is very, very small. The vast majority of people, first of all, go after cashback credit cards, and then travel is maybe second or third on the list. But the vast majority of people use them for domestic travel. So these are the cheaper airline tickets. And it's a very small segment that use them for international flights. And I guarantee that if there was more detail in those surveys and you broke it down further, the percentage of people who use them for, premium, business class, first class, international flights are probably very, very, very small. And so they're not profiting on people who know how to maximize their points, but again, we are a very small segment of the market, and there's still so many people out there who don't utilize their points or don't know how, or use them in a kind of a subpar way, so that the airlines make money, the banks make money, again, going back to paying interest and things like that. So it really, I think, is a lot about what the masses do that allows this to remain a viable hobby for the time being.
So now, of course, your experience and your knowledge, you've put it into a blog form, and you've got a website, and you also have a Twitter account. Can you tell us more about that as well?
Yeah, so I have a blog called uponarriving.com, and I try to post there every day or so. Right now with this storm and things, it's a little crazy, but and so it's kind of a twofold process for me. One is taking in the information and sort of teaching myself how this stuff works, and keeping myself up to date on things, because like I said, things are always changing. And then part of that is relaying the information to people, just because I'm sure you can relate to that. It feels good to relay information that you have to other people, and it's kind of a gratifying process. So that's sort of what I do with that, and I write about the kind of breaking news in credit cards. In fact, there was just this morning I woke up after the thunderous rains and things, and I saw a notification that a new rule just came out for JP Morgan Chase, which is going to make it a lot harder for people to get a certain card that was very, very valuable. It's actually kind of like a big kind of, a lot of people So, I find this stuff out, and then I'm like, okay, let me go write about it and see, investigate more, write about what I think about it. And then also just writing things about what's happening with the airlines, and because it overlaps, you have to know what's, I think Air Berlin just went bankrupt, and their rewards program, I think, is like now, I don't even think it exists anymore. So like you have to keep up with what's going on, and there's a lot of airlines and a lot of different alliances to keep tabs on. So it's kind of like a second full-time job for me in a lot of ways.
That's a hobby. and I mean, do you obviously list all these these links on your blog or your website?
Yeah, I mean, I get on there and I link to things, and I talk about things, and so it's there. And I mean, there are some blogs who are like, full-time like establishments. I mean, they're like pumping out like a dozen articles a day, and so a lot of times I'll take my news from them and get resources from them, and then every now and again, you'll discover something that no one else is talking about. But it just depends on what's happening and where to look. But it's process to stay up to date, because with this stuff, if you can't just take a break, and spend a month or two away and come back and think everything's going to be the same, because it could be completely different.
Well, that's true. I mean, and unfortunately, with the way the world works, when there's a political instability in a certain country, then maybe Turkish Airlines is no longer a popular choice. When Qatar is now excluded from certain functions, then all of a sudden Qatar Airlines might feel the pinch as well, and then you notice that the prices drop for all the international flights because they're trying to attract customers. Does that impact on the number of air miles that you would need for first class?
Yeah, I mean, it does. And I mean, for example, this happened, I want to say a year and a half ago, maybe, where Emirates is also one of the top first class experiences. Everybody wants to fly Emirates. And Alaska Airlines was a great way to book Emirates. So you would earn the Alaska miles, Alaska or a partner, or from Alaska credit cards, and then you would book first class trips for super, super cheap. And then overnight, with no notice or anything, I think they like tripled the price for first class. I mean, it just like rose like crazy, and business class went way up there too. And so you have people who had been, planning and earning miles, and then they wake up the next day thinking they're going to book, and all of a sudden they're nowhere close to having what they needed. So that's just sort of the way the game goes. You take some wins and you take some losses.
So that's pretty exciting. Now, I know that Joe posted a very interesting article. I tried to have a look at it, and it was called The Pudding Air Travel Redemption. Do you know anything about that one?
Yeah, I think I remember that. There was a guy who kind of just went all out with this pudding canisters or pudding little cups, and he bought like an insane amount of them because he was able to earn, I don't remember the rates, but a good amount. And he just bought like truckloads of this stuff and ended up them to like the Red Cross or Salvation Army or something in the end. But he earned an insane amount of miles. And I mean, just buying pudding, and it's crazy. Who in the right
mind would give air miles for buying pudding?
And there's some, not on the 1.25 million air. That's great. That's more than we had for our around the world trip. So that's just from pudding. But you'll see other promotions too. Like I was talking about those shopping portals. There was a promotion for a dating website, and so I mean, I'm married, but some people are married too, and they were jumping on this dating promotion to earn miles. And because you signed up and you earned like 40,000 British Airways, called Avios. And but this kind of goes into what I was talking about, the so many people jumped on this and took advantage of it that they retracted the offer. And so people were scrambling to get refunds because they were spending a couple of $100s because they were earning so many miles. It was worth it. I mean, you pay a couple $100 for 80,000 miles. Yeah, they'll do it. So there's thousands of people, that are trying to get refunds, and then you're trying to call the business up, and you're married and you're calling a dating website to get a refund, and it's just like a complete situation that a lot of people fell into. But that happens a lot. Things like that happen a lot.
I mean, you're playing the game. Now, I'm just wondering, do Joe or Sebastian or Govinda or Beatrix or perhaps Lorraine, if any of you guys have got some questions you might want to ask? I see Joe's got one. Go for it.
Yeah, I was curious. I think I caught that you said you've applied for 50 credit cards. How has that affected your personal credit score? That's one of the things I talk to students about all the time, credit scores, credit cards, how all that works. This is kind of an extreme example, so it might be interesting to talk to them about.
Yeah, no, that's great that you yeah, first, I think it's great that you talk to your students about credit, because I feel like so many students or teachers don't do that, and it's such an injustice to students because I graduated and I really had no idea about credit. I didn't know how it worked or the importance of it. So I think that's awesome that you're doing that. But to be honest, my credit score is very, very good. It's very, very strong, and that's because if you know kind of the ins and outs of credit, you know that 65% of your score, at least here in the US, FICO score, which is the one that most lenders use, is determined by your payment history and utilization. And so the more credit cards you open and the more payments that you make on time and the more times you pay your balance off in full so that your utilization does not go up, that's going to benefit your score. So over time, you're going to take some dips from, when you open up a new card, you have a hard inquiry, so your score might drop 3 to 5 points. But over time, there's going to be an upward trajectory of your score because you're building up that payment history. You're keeping down that utilization, using these cards responsibly, right? So that's another big thing, is people running up these huge balances, maxing out their cards, and then falling into default, which is a disaster. And one reason why I would not necessarily recommend this to most people, because having access to $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 of accessible credit is just too big of a temptation for people. They see it as free money, and it's just not the way it works, especially with rewards cards. They have high interest rates, right. So you've got to be very, very disciplined and to know, okay, I'm going to pay my balance off in full, or at least very, very close to full, right? And at that point, your score will benefit. But if you don't know what you're doing and you're not responsible, you're going to go down, and it's not going to be pretty.
I was also curious, how do you organize all this personally? How do you keep track of it all?
Well, it started just kind of where I had like here's a new credit card I got, I listed, and then I list things like the important dates, like the deadline for the bonus, the account opening date, the deadline for the payment, just to kind of keep tabs on things. And then as I started getting more and more cards, I kind of got more detailed. So then I started listing other things, like if I did sometimes you'll have to downgrade a card or product change a card. And those are really important dates to keep tabs of, because later on when you want to do something with that card, you need to know, okay, how long has it been since I've done something with this card, since I've downgraded it or something. And so I keep track of that. I keep track of the last 4 digits of the card. And so I have this, this really detailed spreadsheet with all of our cards, and even I manage a couple of other people's cards, family members that I've helped out. So just to kind of keep tabs on them. The first time if you saw it, it'd be a little overwhelming maybe, but it works and you get used to it. And so some people, they kind of use standardized or universal spreadsheets, which works for them. But for me, I'm one of those people where I kind of need to do my own organic thing and have it to where it makes sense to me. But it does. And really the only work that I have to do for some of these cards is to check them on a monthly basis for fraud purposes. And that's a thing that is kind of a burden. You have to log in. Even if you're not using that card, you still need to log in, because you could easily just be defrauded and not know it for months if you just sleep on a card. So that's the only really work I have to do for some of them. But that spreadsheet makes it very, very easy at any given time to see, okay, this is how many cards I have. This is how long I've had them. And then, like I was referring to earlier with the rules, and know exactly how long you've had those cards, down to the month or day even, because you'll risk a rejection or some unnecessary hit on your score.
I think what you need is an app where you can put all your cards into the app, and it sends you reminders that you haven't spent enough money on this particular card, that the app will tell you that maybe your deadline's coming up in a week's time. Perhaps it's time to spend $100 on this particular card. And then the app would also notify you. So what you could do is create the app, people could then download it, sign up all their credit cards, and what would happen is it would check your accounts for any suspicious activities. You could say, you know, do a quick account check. Have I had any activities in the last 2 weeks? You could also have a system where the thing will tell you if there's been any new changes to the cards, if there's a new deal coming out that this app would notify you. I mean, it could be a travel hacker's delight, and I'm sure that you'd find at least 1 million people in the US that would be eager to have the app manage their cards for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of apps out there. I'm not sure if they do, like you mentioned, the security check kind of on a weekly basis or automated basis, which I think is a great idea. But I know there are some out there, and you know, I think one of the risks that a lot of people have is because it's your finances, and so a lot of people are a little kind of reluctant. But you know, for me, I'm just kind of just naturally an obsessive kind of person. So like, it's just natural for me to check my stuff all the time. I mean, it's, if I have nothing else to do, let me just check my accounts, you know. So
wow, sure. Lorraine, do you have any questions? Sebastian, Beatrix, any questions? Don't be shy.
Actually, I do have a question.
Okay.
I was researching some of the credit cards just recently, and I didn't think of this option of getting like 50 or 20. I thought it's quite a lot, and I was thinking about how to select, you know, or what to look for when you are looking at those cards. What are the things that you have to check? The basic things that you have to look for.
Good question.
That's a really good question, and I think it varies for a lot of people. But start with is do you even want a travel credit card? So this is one thing that I think a lot of people don't really think about. Is they just, oh yeah, travel card, that's what I need, that's what I want. But you know, cash back cards are great for people who don't want to deal with all of the complexity of airline travel, or maybe they don't even really travel or want to travel. So they can use that cash back and earn money back, and then, you know, store it away somewhere, and then maybe use that for travel later. So the first thing I think is trying to determine, do you even need a travel credit card, or is a cash back card better? But card, I think a lot of factors go into it. Number one is the sign-up bonus. What is that sign-up bonus? Are you earning flexible currency, which are points that you can transfer out to different airlines? You can transfer them to hotels, or you can use them sometimes for cruises, or just, so that's a big thing. Some people want to remain loyal to an airline and stick to like a United Airlines card, for example. And then also another thing is the bonus earning rates. So a lot of these cards will earn you 2 to 3 points per dollar spent on things like dining or travel, or if you go to a supermarket. And so to kind of take a snapshot of your expenses from the prior, say, 2 or 3 months, and kind of break it down, analyze it, and say, okay, I spend most of my money on groceries, money on dining and travel expenses. And then you can kind of prioritize, okay, this card will be better for me because most of my spend is going to be here, and I'll earn more miles, or, you know, more points for cash back, or whatever. So I think knowing what kind of card is best for you, and then looking at the sign-up bonus and then the bonus points, those are kind of like.
Sure.
Thank you. Just one more thing. It won't be a question. It's more like sharing with you the story of my friends we both work in the Emirates, and we have the credit card that we have like connected with our work, and they both offer the touch points, which we can redeem for air miles, and they both have Etihad and Emirates because they are the national airlines. Those links with them. So what he did during this summer in July, for a whole month, he was traveling business in first class all over Southeastern Asia, just using these points. So that's something similar to your story, as I understand.
I love it.
Yeah. So what kind of card is it?
What was it? What was it?
What kind of card? What kind of?
Oh, okay. It's an ADCB card.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the National Bank of most popular in the Emirates. So yeah, we're trying.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing that that all these offers are available, you know, in terms of the credit cards. And I'm sure that, you know, if you buy a car, they might offer you air miles as well, depending on, you know. Now, you also get credit cards, and then you get cards specifically for travel. Are those cards more invested in air miles per se?
So I don't quite get it. You're saying, are you talking about the difference in travel credit cards?
So you get credit cards, your regular credit card, which I can use overseas if I travel. And then you get ones, for example, like American Express Traveler's Check type credit card that you would use if you travel overseas. Do you get extra miles because you're spending your foreign exchange through those cards?
We just kind of use the standard travel cards at all times, like the standard cards we use when we're around here for dining and travel, because they have no foreign. Yeah.
Okay, but you call them travel cards.
Yeah, well, like a travel card to me is just a credit card that earns points or miles that you can use for travel. So there's probably a difference there. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, now I get it. I get it. All right. Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I'm so delighted. Let's try that again. It's been a long day. I'm so delighted that Dan was able to assist us and give us some more insight into what he called enthusiastic credit card spending. I love that. But of course, people also term it as travel hacking. And, you know, I suppose if you, from a maker point of view, when we hack things, it means you find a creative way to work around it. And you found creative ways to obviously, you know, travel the world. And so to end off, two things. One is your bucket list. Where are you planning to go to spend your next set of air miles? And then I'll ask you a final question after that.
Well, we actually have a really big trip planned, but we're keeping it under wraps a little bit. So we're not saying, it's not a huge surprise, but we're just keeping it a little bit under wraps. And there's also some things that we're trying to still work through because things are changing all the time. So, but it's another around the world trip. It was 10 times more complex than our last one in terms of trying to work the connections and all of that, because it's so many more segments, and we're just kind of having fun with it. So, but we're hitting up some of our really kind of bucket list spots. One of them is the Maldives, and that's a place we wanted to go for a while. We're really big into diving, and so that's a great diving spot. And then we're just going to try to make everything else work with what's going on. So I'd say that's going to be sometime next year in February when we'll take off on it. So that's really exciting. And in the meantime, we may do another little excursion here or there on the weekend, but that's kind of the next big step.
Aha. Well, you know, we've got people from Nepal, and we've got people in India and all over the world who would love to know when you are coming so they can pop in and say hi. But I can tell you that, for example, off the coast of Durban, you can, if you know the right people, go diving with the coelacanth. And I don't know if you know about the coelacanth, but it is a prehistoric fish that was always thought to have been extinct until they discovered one that was pulled up in a fishing net. And if you take the original fossils and you take the actual coelacanth today, they haven't changed at all.
Wow.
And they've actually managed to find several groups of coelacanth swimming in certain parts of Africa, and you can actually go dive down and see a real dinosaur swimming. So I just wanted to mention that to you because I know how much you like diving and you want to come back to South Africa. I'll send you details. I'll send you details. And then the final question was, if someone was going to get started, where's the best place to start?
I mean, it kind of depends on where you're at, you know, in the world, the U.S. or international, because things will be different. But I think the biggest thing is to start with just the research and the commitment to learn a lot of this stuff, and start with learning about, in the U.S., your credit score and how that works, because you don't want to just, it's sort of like driving. You don't want to just get behind the wheel and just take off before you know how a car works and how to turn and brake and things like that, because you can inflict damage upon yourself. So you need to have a thorough understanding of the fundamentals of a credit score and how that works. And because that's going to benefit you outside of all of this. And then once you get to that point where you understand it and you have a good score, then start looking into the credit cards. And I kind of have like a 3-step process on my website, uponarriving.com, that's for beginners, where they can go and just see a lot of the stuff they need to learn. And it's not meant to just read, and it's not just going to click with you overnight. It's going to take weeks or months to kind of accumulate the knowledge, but it'll be a good starting point to read about, okay, this is how credit cards work, credit scores, and then a little bit on the airline side. So getting the basics down and going with the mindset that it's a time commitment. You know, it's like trying to learn guitar or something. Like, you're not just going to do it overnight or in a week. It's going to be kind of a relentless effort over time to learn this stuff.
But it is doable. It is completely doable. It can happen.
Yeah, it definitely can happen. So yeah, a lot of people can do it. And, you know, another big thing is just make sure if you're getting into the credit cards, you have the discipline, you have the responsibility to make your payments on time, to not just go and buy a bunch of bling or something. You know, like it's not free money, and you're defeating the whole purpose of doing it if you do that kind of stuff and just run up your balances. So that's another big thing too.
Okay. Well, Dan, I'd like to thank you so much for giving up of your time. I know that you've got plenty of it because, you know, there are things floating all over the outside, so you probably can't even leave the building anyway. We thank you so much for sharing some of the insights in terms of how to go about doing it. And I know that there'll be some teachers who are quite excited about the prospect of, you know, even if they just get enough Voyager miles, or air miles to go on the cattle truck, it's fine, because at least they're getting to go on an overseas destination, and that also works for them. It doesn't always have to be business.
Right. Exactly. And that's another thing too. If you just want to see the world and explore, you don't have to rack up millions of miles. You know, you can get in there and you can get enough for an economy ticket somewhere. And so you don't have to go like crazy with it.
But once you do, according to Dan, you don't ever look back. Soon you're going to have to be flying in the cockpit because, you know, nothing else is going to be good enough for you.
That's pretty much. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And now I'm just going to ask you to smile for the camera so we can get one quick screenshot. Right. That's great. And one more just in case. Are you ready? Great. That's perfect. I'm going to stop the broadcast over here.